especially the role of the club secretary. Club secretary basically defines the success of the club. The he is the power behind the organization, he or she, and they make sure that the club performs and club is vibrant. It is critical that our leadership, the president, leads and provides vision and provides the encouragement, motivation to the club. But at the same time, the organization of the secretary drives the club. So let's jump in. Today, we will be touching, since we have only half an hour, we are briefly going to touch the roles and responsibilities of club secretary, planning of the term, meeting management, the records that the secretary needs to keep, what happens at the end of the term. Since this is a midwinter refresher, we should be talking about the end of term for this dynastic year. And then the resources that are available for you as a club secretary or club officer. So we are going to quickly touch all this. So let's go jump over to the roles and responsibilities of the secretary. the 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 standard bylaws of the Lions International in the section 3, article 3 of section and section 5, it defines the role of club secretary. It is something like that. This is one is submits the regular monthly and other reports to the Lions International office. Traditionally, I'm just going to refer to some traditional procedures. We used to submit a MMR, the monthly membership report, and the service report on paper, just like about 10, 15 years back. But that had changed. Everything is on the portal. Report to the district. Again, since everything is on portal, we don't have to report to and clog the mailbox of the governor and the cabinet secretary and everyone. But at the same time, we should be submitting reports to our zone chairs whenever asked. Every quarter we have the cabinet meeting, district cabinet meeting, and for that meeting, our zone chairs are supposed to present the health of their zone, which includes your membership and service reports. Then, as we discussed last time, the president and secretary of all clubs are the members of district governors advisory committee. All of the president and secretary should be active in their zones to be part of the district governors advisory committee. It's like sort of long-winded way to say zone meeting. The district governors advisory committee meeting is the zone meeting. Record keeping. To keep all the records of the club in custody and keep and maintain general records for this club is a role of the club secretary. Bond. There are some club, since this is a critical position and the secretary has in possession several items from the club used to ask for bonds. Many of the clubs now don't ask for a bond, but this is what the bylaws mention. And last but not least, the year-end report. Once you perform your duties throughout the year, prepare annual report and pass it on everything to your successor. That is the role and responsibilities that the standard club bylaws explain. Having said that, this is a little bit confusing. So when I started thinking about being a secretary, I sort of classified the roles into three broad categories. One is organize. One is to understand our association, what it means to be a Lions Club, getting ready to serve as a secretary. This is a basic necessity to know the structure and the constitution and all that things that are critical to serve as a club secretary. So understanding the association, keep all the operations organized, the um, announcing the meetings, like helping the president to run the meetings, and so on. All like the even for that matter activities, helping the committee chairs to organize activities, keep track of what is happening, and the last but not least, be the knowledge base for the club. Usually, many times it is observed that secretaries are usually a senior member of the club who knows the history of the club, knows the relationships with the other clubs, relationship with the township, and how the club came to this point. So the one of the very critical role is to organize, be an organizer. Before I move further, in the past, long time back, we used to have two secretaries in the club. One secretary was called the Secretary for Communication, and the other secretary was Secretary for the Records. We don't have that anymore. We have one secretary. So, but adding those roles, communication. The role of the secretary is to facilitate the communication within the club, giving the information within the club. It is with the Lions organization, interacting with the district, interacting with the multiple district, interacting with the Lions International. Whenever you get messages, responding to them, and if it is required to be passed it on to the clubs, bringing that message from international or district to the clubs is the role of the secretary. And communicating with the outside world, like the local elected officers, local nonprofit organizations, the your partners and your donors, and keeping them aware of the ongoing activities of your club is the role of a secretary. Then record, it is pretty much simple. All that your club does, meetings, activities, everything that the secretary need to record, keep a record of. And then not just for that year, but maintain the history of the club. So we were just talking about the the 47th anniversary of a club. I visited like about a couple of months back, I visited the club who was celebrating their 100th anniversary. Unless there are effective secretaries and they keep track of their history, sometimes the history might just get lost. So being a strong and knowledgeable, active secretary is the critical factor for success of any club. Let's quickly jump over to few things one by one. How, what is that you need to do traditionally as a secretary? One, you have to do few things monthly. For example, planning your monthly meeting, monthly general meeting, planning if your club has a different board meeting, planning the board meeting, attending both general and board meetings. Keep all the membership records up to date. There are many times that we recruit members and they are not entered into the Lions portal. Whose fault is that? It lies with the secretary. Then the submitting the service activity report and respond to and send out all the communications, including the meeting notices, the minutes of the meetings, and so on. There are few things that the secretary needs to do quarterly. We are supposed to have a quarterly zone meeting, that is district governors advisory committee meeting. Attending that meeting is essential. Sending the, as I mentioned earlier, sending the service report to the district cabinet, especially the zone chair, letting the zone chair know what activities that took place in your club and what are the anticipated activities in next several weeks. Then the other thing that is important is if there are delinquencies, if there are some members who are not paying the dues or that there are any other issues, bringing that to the board of directors at least once in 3 months is very critical, because you don't want to if there is a issue brewing, you don't want to have that brew for a year and then suddenly you realize that like, oh, okay, this particular person has not paid dues for so long, and you probably have to drop the member, rather than reviewing it quarterly so that we know that we have to take care of this issue, follow up on that particular delinquency, and making sure that the club doesn't lose the member or gets into a wrong spot. Then there are a few things that we need to do biannually. PID Mel is going to talk about the due structure. So like most of us are aware now by now that our district dues and the international dues are billed by per semester. They're billed once in July and once in December. So like considering that, making sure that you have the right list. If you want to drop some members, dropping them before the last date of the semester, before the end of December and end of June, so that we are not billed for that member. That we need to do biannually. Then many times what my observation is, many clubs, their committees send their report at the end of the year. So sometimes like sort of there are things that are forgotten, the reports don't come on time. So just making sure to just keep tab on the committees and making sure that if their service activity is done, getting their report and filing it at least like sort of once in 6 months would help in maintaining the club uh, with a better control. And there are a few things that the secretary needs to do as needed. For example, if you recruit a member in middle of the year, you don't want to say that like, oh, we recruit members only quarterly. Like you come, like if somebody is interested, you can't tell them that like, oh, come in September or come in December. We would be taking care of that right away. So reviewing and processing the new member application is the job that you need to do as needed. Ordering the club supplies, especially the new member application, the new member kits. We always end up having uh, a issue that like sort of, oh, you have a member, we want to induct the member, we go to the club and we don't have the kit for that member. So making sure that like when you are applying for new members, you also need to like send a request to the club supplies to get the new member kits. By the way, the new member kits are provided free for every club, but at the same time, they don't give unlimited number of new member kits. When you report a member, they will send it to you, but you still need to request. Then there are times that we need to schedule some special meetings. It is to be done with the guidance of the president. If there is a, a lion guest from, say, France is visiting us, and that it is not in our schedule, and we need to call a special meeting, that we need to know as needed basis. The club meetings. Many clubs are now started doing the virtual meetings, or they do the meetings along with their service activity. So the importance of club meetings is reducing little by little over a period of time. Having said that, there are certain things that a club secretary needs to follow so that we have a successful club meeting. What are those? Before any meeting, sending the notice ahead of time, not on the day, but well ahead of time, and then sending the reminders. Sometimes, like some of the clubs don't have a specific day for the meeting. The day keeps changing. So it is very essential to provide the right information at the right time and sending some reminders. Every meeting must have an agenda. So the secretary, working with the president, creates the meeting agenda, and the meeting should stick to that agenda. Before every meeting, the secretary should assemble any and all correspondence that they have got from the last meeting to give it to appropriate people. If there are some reports that have come from committees, there are some checks came in for the treasurer. So assembling that and bringing it to the meeting so that you can give it to appropriate Lion member is one of the checklist before you go to the meeting. Then there are certain awards that come in mail, some membership keys, something that your member have achieved in last few days, last few months. So bringing them and having a proper presentation ceremony by the president is the job of the secretary. Many a times the awards are mailed to the secretary. Also keeping the membership kit ready if we have a new member, that we need to do before the meeting. And then we have to keep track of the attendance. We lost the incentive that we used to have in the past, that the Lions took pride in getting 100% attendance award, up to the point like our American president Jimmy Carter, who was a Lion member for almost 70 years, he took a pride in saying that like I am the 100% attendance member for so many years. So that used to be a pride that we never missed a meeting. And when for whatever the life comes up and you miss a meeting, you go and attend the meeting of another club, you go and attend the district meeting to continue with the 100% attendance. So keeping a roster, the annual roster, and also having a column there to mention if our member has attended any other club meeting or any other Lions event is critical. Again, just a off the cuff information that if you visit the Lions headquarters, they give a small card which counts for attendance of one club meeting. Moving on, what do you do during the club meeting as a secretary? Very first thing is recording attendance, recording the proceedings, writing the minutes of the meeting, documenting if you have guests, their credentials, so like how they were invited and what they talked about, what is the agenda for their visit, and so on. That needs to be recorded. And the updates, like if we have a long running project, getting the information from the committee chair to pass it on to entire club, giving information of the project that is completed. All those updates need to be recorded during the meeting. What do you do after the meeting? After the meeting, if there were some awards presented, record those awards, keep pictures of presentations, and so on. Write and distribute the copy of the minutes of the meeting. And the most important thing is following up. We have several times we have the action items during the meeting, and they are never followed up. We remember them at the next meeting, and by the time that like sort of whatever action need to be taken is not taken, and our projects suffer because of that. So most important part of the secretary job is to make sure that he or she follows up with the action items, and just making sure that all the members who have taken the responsibility are on track. We keep talking about minutes of the meeting. Whenever I talk to a new club secretary or even a few secretaries who are been doing this particular, like performing this role for a few terms, but they still are a little confused about what should be in the minutes of the meeting. The minutes of the meeting should include what type of meeting it is, whether it is a regular meeting or a board meeting or a special meeting or any other form of meeting. Whether it is an in-person meeting or virtual meeting, all that need to be recorded into the minutes. The date and place of the meeting, name of the person presiding over, president, if not president, vice president, or who presided over the meeting, whether the previous minutes of the meeting were approved. All motions, all proceedings of the meeting need to be recorded during the meeting and put up into the minutes of the meeting. As I mentioned several times, the action items, what needs to be done in the near future, that should be a part of the minutes of the meeting also. And then the simple thing, time of the meeting was called to order and adjourned. That need to be recorded also. A few quick tips about minutes of the meeting. Be an objective observer. Everybody has biases. Everybody has opinions, and minutes of the meeting should not be written as per what you think should happen, but it should be what was really discussed in the meeting. The minutes of the meeting should not be 10 pages long. You need to summarize in a very few words what happened in the meeting. You should document the rationale of taking a decision. When you took a particular decision, why that decision was taken should be recorded. And then there were references like, oh, we got this information from XYZ source and so on. That needs to be recorded also. The other thing that I have seen that many of the minutes of the meeting record as if it is like sort of a script of a play. They said like, oh, Anu said this, and then Rohel said that, and so on. The thing is, basically, minutes of the meeting should be uh, very, very precise and avoid quoting the names in the discussion. The minutes are meant for recording what the club has done and what the opinion of individual member is, because that might hurt the club, that might hurt that member in the long run. So avoid putting up any names in the minutes of the meeting unless you are giving some awards. Obviously, you need to have names, but in the discussions, try to avoid using the names. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to quickly go over a few things that are essential. As I mentioned, the club secretary is responsible for keeping the records, long-term records of the club. Very simple to remember, club charter. Who stores the club charter? It is the club secretary. Constitution and bylaws. Who keeps the updated copy of constitution bylaws? It is the secretary. I'm going to sort of spend a minute on this. I have observed that many of the clubs don't have updated constitution bylaws for their club. Literally, less than 5% of the lions that I meet and ask, oh, have you seen the constitution of your club? Only 5% say yes. 95% of the members have never seen their constitution and bylaws of the club. That should not be the case. Literally, every single member should have access to the constitution and bylaws, and the secretary should keep the latest copy of constitution and bylaws. Every amendment should be recorded as an amendment, and the document should be updated on a very, very regular basis. Club history, simple. The achievements of the club, the projects, the certificates, the awards and pictures and all that needs to be kept either in a digital format or physical format by the secretary. Minutes of the meeting. It's not like sort of you write the minutes of the meeting, send it to the club, and they're done. We need to store the minutes of the meeting for few years at least, so that if there are anything that you want to go and refer to, there is a possibility of referring to what happened in a particular meeting. So make sure that like you have, ideally create a cloud drive, and every time that you write minutes of the meeting, upload it on that cloud so that it is available for the secretaries that are succeeding you. Annual and committee reports, same thing as minute of the meeting. You need to maintain that for number of years. Activities and service reporting need to be maintained. Even if we have it in the Lions portal, we still need to have some documentation of all the projects or all the activities that we have done. And all these most important thing is all the IRS related documents. I'm sure PID Mel is going to talk about it today, but making sure that when a treasurer files in the 990N form, the submission copy, the copy needs to be with secretary to make sure that we have submitted the 990N every single year. We lose the 51C4 status if we don't submit it in 3 consecutive years. Like what we do at the end of the term, check the records for 100% attendance, number of years of service, or any other appreciation that you want to give it to the member at the end of the year. Like if you are not continuing as a secretary, prepare a template for the next year so that it is helpful for the incoming secretary. Prepare annual report of activities, donations, service hours, etc. to go into your repository of the club history. Make sure that the club records are up to date. Keep a backup. Many times, like sort of technology fails, the issues with the physical documents. So making sure a copy of the document is secure somewhere is another task that you should do at the end of the term. And then meet with the incoming secretary and pass on whatever that you have, knowledge as well as the documents to the new club secretary. That is what you need to do at the end of the term. What are the resources that are available? We have a landing page for secretary. Those who attended the president last time, president's training, they know that there is a landing page for the president and vice president. Similarly, there is a landing page for the club secretaries on lionsclubs.org, which has all the resources listed together. So you don't have to go and search for it in different places. You have a ebook specifically for the club secretary. It has got clickable tools, clickable links to whichever needs that you have as a secretary. Lions Learning Center, there is a learning path for club secretary. It has 2 units, and the whole exercise takes about like 30 to 40 minutes. So please make sure that you go to the Lions Learning Center and take those courses. Lions University, again, this year we have the Lions Forum in New Jersey. You would get a chance to graduate from Lions University for the bachelor's course. If you have not attended the forum before, this is your first time, you can take bachelor's course. And the bachelor's course has got several role-related courses. And last but not least, our incoming international president, AP Singh, publishes the speaking cards. And this year he has promised to get many more cards and distributed among the lions around the world. It is like sort of a pack of playing cards, which has got a very concise information about everything that you need to know about lionism. So that is another resource that we have available. Then I'm just quickly going to remind you the same thing that we talked about last time. Update your constitution bylaws. Make sure that like your tax status, 501c4 status is intact. If not, we need to fix that and do the elections of your club on time and report it before the 15th of May so that the incoming administration, district administration, would have a chance to work on what they need to work on. I'm not going to touch on Club Excellence Award, which we talked. If you have any questions, I think we should take the questions at the end. So thank you for attending. I know that I ran through because we had a very short period of time, but thank you for attending and all the best for being a good club secretary. Over to you, Anu.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I think, thank you, Lion Mahesh. We are now going to move to the treasurer training. Mel, do you want me to run you a PowerPoint or do you want to bring it up yourself?
Probably it would be better if you run it.
Okay, no problem. I can do that.
It seems that I have a problem with whatever I'm saying and my mouth is going and my PowerPoint is off in another place. Okay. The treasurer's job is, you would think, kind of simple, but it's not. I heard Mahesh say earlier that the secretary runs the club and is the most important person to it. And I would tell you that the treasurer is equally as important as the secretary, mainly because they're in control of the money. They need to be reviewing what's being done, what's been approved, and a bunch of other things that have to happen. So you're going to be in a position where everyone's going to come to you and say, do we have the money for? So the treasurer has to have up-to-date records and keep that all maintained very clearly in very specific ways. The slide is showing you that we're supposed to have an administrative account that runs your organization. That's your dues that pays for that. You should have I have them backwards here. You should have the charities activity account that you have to keep the public money separately from the administration money. Anything that you get that's a donation from outside of a member of your club must go into your charity account and be distributed from there. If you're going to have raffles where you do 50/50s and those kind of things, and technically that includes the 50/50 raffles we do at each of our meetings, which most of us do not register and license, but they're still required actually under the law to be doing that. Most of us ignore it because it's small potatoes and it's one-time shot and we're done. The last thing is that when I started in my particular club, we actually kept an absolutely separate accounting for anything that the tail twister generated during the meetings for use for the members. That's kind of in most clubs been folded into the administrative account. They don't keep that extra account. So you do have to have an administrative account, a charities account of some sort. And if you do raffles and you have to file all those extra papers, then you have to have a separate raffle account, which has to be maintained separately from everything else you do. And it has to be reported every year where those funds actually are so that the state could come in and verify your information. So we can go to the next one. Okay. The same reporting schedule that Mahesh talked about, quarterly at least, the Lions International says that you should at least be reporting to your membership quarterly of what the funds are. I can remember visiting clubs when I was a vice governor and a governor, and the only time they ever heard about something was when someone had a request to make a donation to something. They'd turn to the treasurer and say, do we have money for that? And if he said yes, the check went out. If he said no, the check didn't go out. That there was never an accounting. Nobody knew what bank accounts were in what positions in any institution. Nobody cared. And that was crazy because when the guy finally gave up the job after 28 years because he passed away, they were kind of in a quandary of like, where's our money? So you need to have those kind of reports and know where those things are. The board of directors, when you have those monthly meetings, you should be telling the board of directors what monies you have because they're making the decisions to recommend different procedures or distributions during that particular meeting that comes out at your next general meeting and says the board's recommending whatever and that the funds have to be there. So you need to know that kind of thing. Your big process is doing a budget. You have to work with the president and the secretary to develop a budget and know what those limits are. So when people are asking, can we do this? And the budget is for $500, but they're asking to spend $1,000. You need to then have a separate approval for that because it's over what the club would have actually approved for your budgeting item of $500. And every year when you're changing your officers every July, if they change every year or if they change every 2 years, you actually have to go to the bank and change the people who are signing for those particular items. So we can move on to the next one. Okay. And the budget kind of has to be approved. It should be worked on in July. It should be approved in August. It is presented or should be presented to your board in your August meeting. And then it should go at your first general meeting in September. It should be approved by your general membership So in case you don't have meetings, like my club doesn't have meetings in the summer, that would be the way we would do it. Clubs that meet every single month of the year, can move this schedule up and actually get it approved at earlier meetings. We can move on to the next one. Okay, the duties. Each year you have to make sure that the items that are approved to be approved by the general membership actually get the checks that they're supposed to get, as long as you raise the money. The biggest thing is you have to make sure you can raise the money. That's a little more difficult post-COVID than it was in the past. If there's changes, there are things that are coming up, and you are aware that there's going to be some excess monies being asked for, you should be able to work those into your budget. The one thing that you kind of need to do, and a lot of clubs haven't done this for years, is that every time that you end up your year in June, you actually can have excess funds still in your account. A lot of clubs say we've got to spend every dime down to the last $5 to keep the account open by June 30th, and that's not the case. You end up, if you're like us, you have July and you have August before you do a fundraiser. It becomes September, and so you don't have any money to spend on the things that happen during July or August that happen to come in. So if you have a project that you're planning for, that even if it's a September date for that project, you have to have the seed money set aside, be able to pay for that so that you can get the project going to actually get the money into your club. One club down in here in where I'm in 16L, one of the clubs down here actually was running a carnival type program for every May. And the actual president of the club was actually expending over $25,000 of his own money every year, because their philosophy was spend it all by June and we'll raise it for next year. So he would have to wait till they did fundraisers to get his money back. That's not what Lionism is all about. You can actually hold back those monies that you need to make for those deposits for the Ferris wheels and that kind of stuff, all the attractions that they were going to have. So you don't want to strap yourself and not have the ability to do the project that you had planned on because you didn't save any money. We can go to the next one. Okay, each year the club is required to fill the 990 income tax return, as long as you're under Lions International as a 501c4. The code here in the box that's called letter H, you're supposed to also add the 0239, which tells IRS you are under the Lions International code and you're a subgroup of that particular organization. So that's something that you need to do. You can file the 990 as long as your club, the 990N, you can file it as long as your club is not earning $50,000 or more. So if you're at $49,999.99, you can use the 990N. If you got that extra penny or another dollar over it, you have to change and fill out other forms. The other thing is the charitable registration that was mentioned, that you have to file and pay fees for every year, so that you either going to use a CR 300 or you're going to use this in cases where you're over $50,000 for income, you're going to have to use something. This says CR 100, and you'll get a copy of this whole report later, but it's actually a 150 if you're over $50,000. I just checked that out this afternoon on the Consumer Affairs program. We can go to the next one, please. Okay, so if your club has decided to set up its own corporation and be a nonprofit and a 501c3, you're going to have to do more annual reporting. You've got to file separate forms every year with the Secretary of State. You also have to pay fees every year because you've done that, and it's been going on since 2006. If you have in that corporation, you're changing the registered agent, or you're changing the officers' addresses, or one of the officers off there for the year, that's going to cost you extra money each time you fill out the form. You have to do that form every single year by 4 months after the close of the calendar year for your corporation. And if you turn around and file that form, it has to be done with a credit card, or you can do it with a check that can be sent in. Every time I've tried to do it through the checking account and tell them to charge it to their checking account, it always comes back. So it's just easier to use your credit card and get reimbursed out of the club for that. The CR 300, there aren't too many clubs in our group that are going to be worried about filling that out every year, because we're not making over $50,000 every year. But there is biannual reporting that's required, and you'll get some information on that a little bit later. The next slide, please. Okay. Each treasurer is required by international now to be on the LCI portal and have their own unique. That means you can't be sharing the same one you use with your wife or your significant other. You have to have your own email address, and you have to have the access to the computer to be able to do this. People who don't have the access to a computer make it more difficult for all the things that have to be done on the computer. And in the case of the treasurer, you're going to be the only one who can actually go in and pay the bill and use your club credit card if you happen to have one, or a debit card, or you can turn around and you can just mail them a check, whichever way you want to do it. It's always more expeditious for them to get the credit card payment, and then you have your access, you're paid that right away, and you know it's not lost in the mail somewhere. You're going to have to set up if you haven't been the treasurer before, you have to set up a separate access ID and a separate password that you're going to be allowing you to be able to order supplies and do those kind of things using your Master Club account that LCI has. So if you're a president, a secretary, or a treasurer, you can tell LCI, I want to order these things, but if you've signed in as those positions, then you can actually charge it over to your club's account and not have to use your own credit card. We can go next. Okay, monthly statements are mailed, or used to be mailed, to each club showing the activity for the month. Now the LCI has it where on the portal you have, the treasurer gets a notice and says your next statement is available. This treasurer has to go in and pull that up and be able to see it. When I try to do that as the president of my club, or having a PID status doesn't really help. I can't get that information and be able to pay that bill because of my other positions. My wife happens to be the treasurer, so she has to go in and she has to make those determinations, pull up that invoice and be able to send in the money. The one thing that Lions get very laxed on, and you have to kind of change this, is that both your club and LCI required you to pay them as soon as you get the bill. They get the money because they need to do that in order to make the payments that they're running the bigger organization and you're running your club. If without getting the dues payments in on a timely basis, you're always behind the 8 ball, and international is always saying, yeah, okay, you're already, if you start paying them in September, the bill came out for July 1, you're already 60 days almost into the period where they're going to put you up and say, you're going to be put in status quo because you haven't paid your bill, you're behind. So you need to move up the date. And when the secretary, in many clubs, I guess it's the secretary who sends out the dues bill. My particular club, we have the treasurer do that. They usually send it out by the 2nd or the 3rd day of July. So we start getting some of the payments in. Then when we get the international bill comes up in about the 5th of July, we're able to go in and pay that. And usually by the end of the month, we're able to pay our district dues as well, because all those bills have come in. If clubs don't do anything during the summer for July and August, and they start billing in September, you don't have the money to start paying these invoices, and you're always behind and trying to play catch up. And that just creates a lot more work for the governor and the zone chairs and the region chairs to be hounding your club for the payments. So you don't want to do that. When you're sending in your checks to LCI, if you're doing it by a manual basis, then you have a special address that those checks have to go to. It doesn't go to the Oak Brook address. It actually goes to Lions Clubs International on Eagles Way in Chicago, and this will be part of what you're going to get. I don't remember the page numbers covered up with my slide. So you'll be getting a full copy of the entire report here that I'm kind of going through quickly. I knew we can go to the next one. Okay, so when you turn around and you get your invoices showing up on your statement, you want to make sure that you check out the invoice is going to show you each of your members. It's going to show you their ID number with LCI. And it's also going to tell you their status, whether they're life members or family members or head of household, those kind of things. So you know what you're doing as far as the payments are being charged to them. So you want to make sure that you go through that, because every once in a while, the computers like to make a little glitch. They'll either drop somebody or they'll add somebody that's no longer on your club that used to be in your club. So you got to go over the list very carefully to keep their records on international and your records in your club being the same. And if they are correct, then when you get your district dues bill, you're also going to be correct at getting the right invoice for the right number of members. So you want to make sure that you review that particular item every time. The bottom of the bill actually shows you the breakdown of how many life members, how many regular members, how many family members. And so it shows you this, the semi-annual dues is $24. And for a family member, it's only $12 per person. So you need to do that and know those numbers when you're doing your budgeting for the year, because international is going to be $48. This year, they're $48. Next year, they're going to be at $50 because July 1, they go at the last of the $7 increase that they had put through 3 years back. So you'll be getting a little change on that one. We can go to the next one. Okay, this is just an example. I'm using my own district, $12 for the district 16L. The reason I do that is because when you do LCI, and you notice I marked it for 7/125, it's going up $2. So it'll be $50 you have to charge for your members for that. Your state dues is $18 annually that has to be charged. The district, I believe, District J, I keep trying to call you D, is at $10, but whatever the number is, it's going to be with your cabinet secretary. And that may mean that your minimum dues, not including running anything in your club, would actually be $80. I hear clubs saying, we only charge $65 a year. I don't know how they pay for anything else, because what happens is they need extra money. They sit at a meeting and they come to you and say, okay, we have to assess everybody $10 because the governor's here for a visit. And we have to assess people extra money for those kind of things. And it just keeps going on all year because they don't put it into a budget and say, this is how much you actually have to have. An average club is going to be around $33 a year for the dues for running the administration. We have clubs that are 150. We have clubs that are 350. And you say, why? Well, that's because the club at the very top charges in advance for the entire year worth of meetings, so that whatever their meeting bill or charge would be for their dinner gets added on, and they have to pay that in the semi-annual dues that gets put out. So an average person would have to pay about $113 for most clubs. It could be a few dollars here, it could be a few dollars there. But that's kind of the minimum, and you have to make sure, if you're the treasurer, that you have this kind of money, because if you want to give out awards, it's got to come out of that 33. If you want to do something special where you're going to send the president or the secretary or all three with the treasurer to go to the charity ball and then have their spouses paid for separately, you can't do that if you don't have excess money to run your club. So these are just some ideas, and later we're going to go through. I'm not going to go through the 6 pages of it, but there's 6 pages that will follow later of a breakdown of all the things you need to consider when you're setting up your dues for your club. Let's go to the next one. Okay. This just begins the idea that if you're doing a newsletter, it used to be you had to send it and then you had a cost. Now we're doing it, so it's pretty much free because we do it on the internet. But you have guest speakers that you want to have invited. You have the district governor who usually comes at least to visit your club once a year. The vice district governor comes once a year. The zone chair is supposed to come once a year or once a year, but have zone meetings 3 times. And then you have to do things like perfect attendance pins. You have to do certificates. You have to do plaques for end of the year kind of stuff. And some clubs that have region chairs have them visit as well, so that the region chairs would be coming. So those are kind of expenses you could expect, except for the newsletter. We can go to the next one. Okay. General things, postage. We still have postage for some of the stuff that we do. A lot of clubs that have a post office box that they have to pay the rent. And the different kind of things that are all listed here, stationery and some office supplies. The Lion of the Year Award's pretty special. The special certificates that you want to give out for membership or for appreciation. We can go up. We can move to the next one. And then you also have expenses involved with your state council. If you want to send the president, some clubs actually pay for that. The state site committee, state site meetings that are sometimes held, those expenses, district meetings that we have, region meetings, zone meetings, these are all incentive type of things that would get people to go and attend to those, to be supporting those. Merlot's a leftover. I missed him last night when I was correcting all this stuff. Merlot is kind of like our other GMT, GLT, GST, so that you can skip with that. You're going to have charter nights every so often. A club is going to want to have a celebration, holiday parties. If you do things with your club to have some kind of a holiday party, whether it's with gifts or not gifts, an extra charge, that sort of thing. Installation night is usually a special night, so you try and do something special. My particular club likes to bring out hors d'oeuvres for the installation of officers' night, so that it's an extra special night. It's more of a fun thing, a casual thing. And then your governor has a testimonial, and you usually have to do ads. There's also dinners involved, and those things have to come out of your administration. They don't come out of your charity. And then your charitable foundation needs support so that it can help everybody else in your group, including your own club. So we used to have stars in our particular group. We still have the ads, and we're going to have a comedy night this year in our group. But whatever your charitable foundation is running an event, you need to support it so that they can have the money that they need to operate for the rest of the year and support the clubs that we have as well. We can go to the next one. These are all optional. International convention registration, that's usually paid by the individual, but some of the clubs actually pay for that as that stipend. The state convention registration is, what are we, $15, I think, this past year. And then some of the clubs actually pay for the
20.
factors. Oh, it's
20.
Okay. So it's gone up a little for the first time, but in 50 years that I've been in a member, it used to be like $10, which was never enough. And so you have these different things that you may want to send somebody. You're going to have expenses for, if you happen to have a governor in your club, you might want to be kicking in something special for him or her to do special things at the convention. So you need to think all those kind of things into your budget. It's all stuff for consideration. This is not anything past the dues for international and the state and the district, down to that $80. Everything else here is all for jogging your memory to say, should we do this? What do we want to do? Or do we want to, did I miss something? And did he want me to put something else in here? So you can go through all those kind of things as you're making up your budget, but it's very important that you consider them, even if you say no to them, but consider them every year, because you might have a change of heart on some of the things that are there. I think that's the last one, except for the one to reach me. Okay, so you're kind of got a quick version here of everything you're supposed to do. I think we're probably right about at our 30 minutes or about 29. So I'll just say that you have the materials here to think about setting up your budget. Those of you that are treasurers and know you're extending will continue. Look at those things for preparing the budget for next year. Look at what you use for a budget this year and see if things that you want to adjust. Other than that, the last slide that's on there is just going to tell you how to get in touch with me. After the program is over tonight, then Anu is going to send you the copy of the PowerPoint that I used here. And Mahesh, if you want to send me the copy of the one you used, I loved how you designed that. So I can have that for my future if I need it. But Anu, I think we're done unless we have any questions.
There are no questions in the Q&A, sorry, in the chat. There was a question from Rupen about, do we have any fundraising classes at Lions? And Mahesh responded to him saying that there are few resources for fundraising. And Mahesh was going to send that to Rupen. So we will try and send that to everybody. If anyone has any question, please raise your hand. We still have 10 minutes from our scheduled programming time. Okay, John, you can unmute yourself.
Oh, real quickly, Mel, I am really terrible at understanding 501c4 and 501c3. It's like Greek to me. I keep trying to understand it. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, the 501c4 is not a totally tax exempt organization. So we can't get the IRS designation to say we're charitable, nonprofit, pay no taxes, blah, blah, blah. And we can't, as a 501c4, we can do our fundraising under international. That's why when they got set up in 1946, somebody didn't have a designation that said 501c3 and check it off and say that's what they want it to be. Then when they went back and said, you know, this is hurting us, we can't do the fundraising we want to do, but nationally and internationally, whatever, as a 501c3, we have a lot more ability to collect money from people for being tax write-offs. So that corporations don't always want to give to your Lions Club because you're a C4. But if you're a 501c3, you get the designation of being able to be charitable. They can take it off their income tax. And so it's a little more lucrative for you to be a 3 in order to raise more money and increase the money that you have or you can get. And it's when the international decided that we're going to go and ask about getting switched over. Unfortunately, by the time they started in 17, and by the time they actually got around to doing what they wanted to do, took them too long, and a whole host of thousands and thousands and thousands of other organizations all were 501c4s just like we were, and they all wanted to change over to be 501c3, and IRS said, nope, not going to do it. So that's why we ended up starting a LCIF as a separate corporation, as a 501c3, so it can do the things that it does, where we couldn't do that if we were still a 501c4.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just add something to that?
Sure.
I just had a conversation with the Lions Legal because we found out that there are quite a few clubs in our district have lost the 501c4 status. Even if you get 501c3 foundation for your club, it is essential to maintain the 501c4 status. You would be a Lions Club only if you maintain your 501c4 status. So for Lions umbrella organization to be a part of a club of that organization, we have to maintain our 501c4 status. If your club has lost that status, it is essential to get it reinstated because I have observed that like few of the clubs, when they got their 501c3, they just ignored the 501c4. We cannot do that we have to maintain the 501c4 status. Just like Lions Club International is C4 and Lions Club International Foundation is C3. We have two different organizations. Even in local clubs, that is what needs to happen.
That's very true. And the one thing I would point out to you is like Chester is a very big club up in 16N. They raise well over $50,000 in a good year. They might do a whole lot more than that. I'm not going to try and give you exact numbers because I don't know them. But they do everything through their charitable foundation, which is a 501c3. And that the foundation gives the money to the club to disperse so that they can turn around and handle their things. They have to keep records on both. And that was a very good distinction, which I totally lost track of.
Okay, there is a question here from Christine Grover. Do you have suggested dues amount for student/family members?
I didn't put
This
them
is a
in.
loaded question, I think, but it may need whole separate hour discussion, but
There's different designations that that LCI has, including the students. You have to prove that the student is or certify the student is an actual member in some school. We in our districts have decided in some of them not to charge students the dues. So that's just carried by the club or the district all the way through. I don't have the numbers exactly what they are at this point. I didn't get research that with the LCI. So I would say if we have a question about what that current is, unless somebody else knows, I would say the best thing to do is check with International on what those fees are. But then also check with your individual district what your policy is about charging the other half of the dues or whatever the remainder would be.
okay. Council Chair Dawn says the student is half price for international.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was, but I didn't want to confirm that because I don't like to give out bad information. Thank you, Dawn.
Okay.
No
Does
problem.
anyone have?
And the form for the student is the ST5.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, Subarna, I'm not sure what your question is here. Is
Yeah,
there a
I know.
list for the
That's
district?
the reason I unmuted myself, Anu. So I just want, no, Mahesh mentioned about, PC Mahesh mentioned about the list that he has from legal. So I'm just kind of wondering if he was willing to share that list with at least if we can see which all clubs and how best we can help them to reinstate. Because I know reinstating is a process. So is there, because that's what I wanted to check.
No, I don't have a list. I
Hmm.
was just like sort of searching for the club which has lost their 501c4
4C.
status.
Hmm.
So I'm not like really sure about my list because the unfortunate part is many of the clubs have reused their 501c4 tax ID for their 501c3. So their 501c4 is terminated, but they have 501c3 with the same tax ID.
Okay.
There are some clubs which have there are a couple of clubs who had used the same tax ID. There are a couple of clubs who have multiple tax IDs. So it is very, very difficult to find out. We need to know which tax ID a club is using, and I can probably do the sort of a legwork to find out whether their 501c3 is active or not.
Hmm. I
But
mean, that is also, if club is proactive, you can actually go into IRS website and do your EIN search if you have your EIN, because that will
Right.
give you exactly the status of the club, correct? So
absolutely.
that
But
is,
if the club doesn't know or if club doesn't want to do, we can do it at the district level because it is a very, very serious issue. And
correct.
My feeling is we have about 10 to 15 clubs who might be in trouble.
Wow. Mm, I that's a big number, Mahesh, to lose a 501(c) because then you are non-existent as a
Right.
club if you don't have any other thing. I mean, forget the part if you have a 501(c) or not, but then as a social organization, how you're reinstated as part of Alliance International, then you're non-existent technically.
More than non-existent, you would be treated as a for-profit entity. And
Exactly.
every single penny that you get in to the club, including your membership dues,
It will be taxable.
will be taxable.
Talking with Mahesh about this, and we'll go through all these clubs that has this different clubs have different problems, and we're going to sort out, and hopefully before the end of this Lion Year, we'll be able to come up with solution to some, not for all, because it's a long process for some of them. So we'll try our best to clean up or to work out some solutions.
But we will work on it. We'll surely make
Okay,
sure.
I think this topic came up in the last cabinet meeting, right?
Yeah.
right.
Okay. So it is almost 8:15. Were there any other questions besides 501(c)(3), C4? I know this is like a very near and dear to heart topic. It has become one.
Yeah, I'd like to, instead of a question, I just want to take this opportunity to thank PID Mel and PCC Mahesh for the wonderful presentation. I know it's an eye-opener for all of us present here, and hopefully this will spread through our clubs and be able to share all of these in our respective clubs. It's a good thing to have this refresher, and yeah, it's a good thing for the club and eventually a good thing for the district. So, and thank you, GLT.
Thank you everyone for joining. I hope everyone got something out of this training.
Mel, I think that's a point. Mel?
I just wanted to remind everybody, there's a 7-page section in the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs. And if you go in and you ask information about the charitable registration, it's going to answer a whole bunch of questions for you about the things that you need to know, the limits for which form you have to fill out for the charitable registration and that kind of thing. Because if you're doing any kind of raffles, you have to be doing them through them. Otherwise, you can end up being fined at least $15,000 for any time that any discrepancy that they find where you weren't licensed to be able to run that particular thing, or you took money from the public and you weren't registered. So you want to make sure that you go through and find that New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs and look under charitable registration, and it starts off with why it was started, and then it comes back to all the forms you have to fill out. So you want to get that so you can talk to people and say, this is the gospel. I got it right here. You can't see it, but that would help you just answer some of the questions, and it might help John as well.
Yeah, any other questions that you can think of in the days to come, just send them to me or to Peter or anybody, or to GLT Anu, PCC Mahesh, or even PID Mel if you have a specific question on this presentation. So,
Sure.
Alrighty, thank you all, and good night.
Thank you.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.